Hey there, let me ask you a slightly annoying question. If your tax money had a GPS tracker on it, would you actually like where it goes? Because right now, taxes feel like this. You work, money disappears, government shrugs. End of story. So let's follow $1. Not metaphorically. Literally. Meet Alice. Alice gets paid. She looks at her paycheck. She sighs. Because before she even touches her money, a chunk is already gone. Income tax. Payroll tax. Local tax. Alice mutters the classic phrase, okay, but where does this actually go? Great question. So let's imagine the government is Bob. Bob is not evil. Bob is overwhelmed. Bob runs the biggest group project in history, and everyone has opinions. Alice hands Bob her tax dollar. Bob does not put it in a box labeled Alice's Roads or Alice's hospital visit. That's the first surprise. Taxes don't work like a vending machine. They work like a bathtub. Money flows in, money flows out. And the water level has to stay just right or everything floods or dries up. Now, before Bob does anything useful or visible, something boring but unavoidable happens. Debt. Bob owes money from the past. Loans taken years ago to fund wars, crises, recessions, emergencies, and promises people already voted for. That debt sends a bill every year. Interest. Alice never voted on most of it, but she still helps pay it. Because the past doesn't disappear. So the first stop for Alice's tax dollar? Paying yesterday. Next stop? People who already stopped working. Retirees. Pensions. Social Security. These are not optional expenses. Bob promised them decades ago. If Bob breaks that promise, the entire system loses trust overnight. So Alice's money helps pay people who worked before she did. That's not corruption. That's time travel. Now healthcare. This one is a money vacuum. Hospitals, doctors, nurses, equipment, medication. And here's the sneaky part. Healthcare gets more expensive even if nothing improves. New technology costs more. People live longer. Expectations rise. So Bob spends more every year just to stay in the same place. Alice doesn't notice dramatic improvements. She just notices her taxes didn't go down. Now education, schools, universities, teachers, buildings, buses, heating. Alice might not be in school anymore. But education isn't a service you turn on and off. You can't pause it because this year feels expensive. Miss a generation, pay for it forever. So Alice's money goes into the future, even if she never personally cashes that check. Now infrastructure. This is where people get mad. Why are we still paying for roads? They already exist. Yes, and they decay. Bridges rust. Pipes leak. Power grids age. Infrastructure is like your teeth. Ignore it long enough and eventually everything hurts and costs 10 times more. Maintenance is invisible. You don't notice the bridge that didn't collapse. You only notice the one that did. So Alice pays for nothing happening, which feels awful. Now safety. Police, firefighters, emergency services. Alice might not need them today or this year, but the one time she does, she expects them in minutes. That readiness costs money every single day. Now pause. Notice something important. We haven't talked about new ideas yet. No shiny stuff. No innovation. Just keeping things from breaking. That's where most tax money goes. To stability, not progress. And stability is boring. Now Bob finally reaches the part people argue about. Discretionary spending. This is the tiny slice politicians fight over on TV. The stuff that sounds optional. But by the time Bob gets here, most of Alice's dollar is already gone. Pre-assigned. So when Alice says, why don't they just spend it better? Bob thinks, with what flexibility? Now let's talk about something uncomfortable. Systems. A lot of tax money doesn't go to people at all. It goes to keeping systems running. Regulators, inspectors, auditors, IT systems, compliance department, paperwork for paperwork. This feels wasteful. Sometimes it is. But large systems need maintenance or they collapse in weird, unpredictable ways. You don't notice good regulation. You only notice the disaster when it's missing. Now emergencies, pandemics, natural disasters, financial crises, Bob keeps money ready for things he hopes never happen. When nothing happens, people complain it was wasted. When something happens, people complain it wasn't enough. Alice pays for insurance she never sees. Until the worst day. Now here's where Alice gets really annoyed. She sees news about waste. Overpriced contracts. Failed projects. Bureaucratic nonsense. And she's not wrong. Waste exists. But here's the frustrating truth. Even if Bob magically eliminated all waste tomorrow, taxes would still feel high. Because waste is loud, but not the biggest expense. The biggest expenses are structural. Aging populations, healthcare, debt interest, long-term promises. Now here's the illusion that breaks people. Alice thinks her taxes fund the government. But the government isn't one thing. It's layers. Local government fixes sidewalks. Regional government runs hospitals. National government handles defense and debt. Her tax dollar splits, merges, and gets reshuffled. It doesn't wear a name tag. So when Alice asks, where does my tax money go? The honest answer is everywhere and nowhere, which is deeply unsatisfying. Because humans want clean stories. I paid for this. Taxes don't give you that. They give you collective outcomes. Now here's the biggest misconception of all. People think taxes mostly fund new things. In reality, taxes mostly fund the past. Old promises, old debts, old systems. Very little goes to bold new ideas. Because the future is expensive and the past already sent the bill. That's why governments always sound broke. Not because money disappears, but because by the time it arrives, it already has 10 obligations waiting. So Alice's dollar goes in. And before anyone says, let's build something exciting, it's already spoken for. And that's the moment where the real question quietly changes. It's no longer just where does my tax money go? It becomes how much room does the government actually have to do anything new at all? Because once you start following the dollar honestly, you realize most of the budget isn't about choices, it's about commitments. And commitments don't care how annoyed Alice feels about her paycheck. They just keep asking to be paid, year after year, quietly, relentlessly, until one day Alice realizes the argument was never really about waste, it was about how much of the system is already locked in, and what happens when there's almost no room left to move. And what happens when there's almost no room left to move. Because when flexibility disappears, every decision feels like a fight. Bob isn't choosing between good and bad options anymore. He's choosing between bad and worse. Cut spending? Someone loses something real. Raise taxes? Someone feels it immediately. Borrow more? Future budgets tighten even further. So Bob does what humans always do under pressure. He delays. He patches. He postpones. He kicks the can. Not because he's lazy. Because the system is heavy. Now let's sit with Alice for a moment. Alice doesn't hate taxes in theory. She hates the feeling of paying more and understanding less. She hears big numbers. Billions. Trillions. But none of it connects to her life, clearly. Her road still has potholes. Her doctor still has long wait times. Her rent still goes up. So she assumes the money is being wasted. Sometimes it is. But more often, it's being absorbed by obligations that never make headlines. Now here's something people almost never realize. Governments don't get to start fresh. Every year's budget is built on top of the last one. Imagine if Alice's personal budget worked like that. Every year she inherits, old subscriptions she can't cancel, loans she didn't take out, bills from decisions she didn't make. And if she stops paying them, her entire life breaks. That's government budgeting. Now let's talk about scale. When Alice wastes $100, it's annoying. When a government wastes zero, 1% of its budget, it's millions. So waste feels massive. But proportionally, it's often smaller than people think. The real money is in things that must be paid. Healthcare, pensions, interest. Those don't make for viral news stories. But they quietly eat the budget alive. Now here's another uncomfortable truth. People often say, why doesn't the government run like a business? Because businesses get to choose their customers. Governments don't. Businesses can drop unprofitable services. Governments can't. Businesses can fail and disappear. Governments can't. So governments carry inefficiencies because their job is stability, not optimization. That's not inspiring, but it's real. Now let's talk about one of the biggest illusions. People imagine taxes going into a vault that politicians then decide how to spend. In reality, money is constantly in motion. Taxes collected today often pay for obligations due this month. Pensions, salaries, debt interest. There's no pause button. Bob isn't sitting on piles of cash deciding what to do with them. He's trying to keep up. Now think about this. When Alice pays taxes, she's not just paying for services. She's paying for continuity. For the idea that tomorrow will look roughly like today. That contracts will be honored. That systems will function. That emergencies will be handled. This is hard to appreciate because continuity feels like nothing. But when continuity breaks, everything feels expensive all at once. Now here's the twist. As societies grow richer, they also grow more expensive to run. People expect better healthcare, safer infrastructure, more protection. Those expectations never shrink. So tax money has to stretch further just to meet rising standards, which makes it feel like nothing ever improves. Now Alice hears someone say, just cut spending. She nods. Sounds reasonable. But which spending? Healthcare? Pensions? Debt interest? Education? Emergency services? Every cut hits someone real. Every cut creates backlash. So cuts happen slowly, painfully, often too late. Now let's talk about the part no one likes. Trust. When people trust the system, they tolerate taxes. When they don't, every dollar hurts. If Alice believed everyone paid fairly, that money was spent competently, and that sacrifices were shared, her tax bill would feel lighter, even if it stayed the same. But when trust erodes, taxes feel like punishment. And that's where many societies are now. High expectations, high costs, low trust. The worst possible combination. So when Alice asks, where does my tax money actually go? The real answer is not a place. It's a process. A constant effort to keep a complex society functioning despite aging populations, rising costs, and old promises. Her money doesn't fund a shiny future. It maintains a fragile present. And that's deeply unsatisfying. But it's also honest. Because once you see taxes this way, the conversation changes. It stops being about villains and starts being about trade-offs. Do we want more services or lower taxes? More security or more flexibility? More promises or fewer obligations? These are hard questions. There are no free answers. And pretending there are is how systems get overloaded. So, in conclusion, your tax money doesn't vanish or go to just one thing. It flows into a shared pool that mostly pays for existing commitments, old promises, and the constant maintenance of a complex society. Taxes feel frustrating because the benefits are often invisible, delayed, or collective, while the cost is immediate and personal. Understanding where the money actually goes doesn't make paying taxes fun, but it explains why governments feel constrained and why so little of the budget is truly flexible. If you want me to make other videos explaining these topics, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.